Welcome back, sci-fi fans, to another episode of the Science Fictionary Podcast. And I'm Andrew. I'm here today with Marisha.
How's it going?
And as some of you know, I'm sick, so
It's true.
I'm going to try not to cough or have to blow my nose or anything like that during this
But
live
at
stream.
least you won't be infected if he does.
It's true.
Who will be?
You had it first.
No, I think it was the children.
Well, the children had it first, but you had it before me.
Okay. Well, you had it worse.
Yes.
I don't want it again.
So we're going to talk today. This is going to be the first of two live streams today. This is going to be our talk about Lord of the Rings of Power, which is just a mouthful. So forgive us, but we're just going to call it the Rings of Power.
It's a good plan.
Because that's entirely too long of a title.
It really, I understand why they went that direction. Because if they just called it Rings, they want to make sure that they tie it in the.
Well, and for all we know, it was a requirement.
Yeah, that's true.
By the estate to tie it to the source materials in a stronger way. So, we've talked about this a few times. We've actually got a couple of videos up on the channel about it, including our most successful video where we talked about the kind of the first little bits of news that we saw first. I don't remember if it was the first images or first teaser or what, but
the marketing for this show has been really hit or miss. The thing where they had the fire going through, that was great. That little teaser that they had, with the image burning through and whenever they revealed the title reveal, I guess is what it was. The title reveal was great. The Vanity Fair article was fine. The first article, though, was it Vanity Fair that they were like, new character, new stories, different. I know that they were using all of the wrong buzzwords, all of the buzzwords to make.
Yeah, and we compared that. We talked about that earlier. We compared it to the way they tried to pitch the Eternals. That Marvel tried to pitch the Eternals movie to everybody. Similar, not exactly the same, but like longtime Tolkien fans, the way to pitch a Tolkien property to them is not, oh, look at all the new characters we made.
Look at all the different stuff we did.
Right. So I understand why people are upset. And honestly, it looks like a lot of it, and even some of the characters that they're kind of like, oh, this is this character. It doesn't really look like some of those characters are going to be exactly who they told us they were.
Yeah. And, honestly, you remember back when they first told us about this, Will Poulter was supposed to be a human character. Back at the very beginning when they first started talking about this show. And we thought it was going to have to do with the past of the dead.
I thought Will Poulter was the original Elrond.
No, he was a human character.
Okay.
An original human.
But this show has undergone
retooled this
rewriting. And I'm still getting really mixed messages from cast and crew as to what they actually have access to. During some of the panels yesterday, some of them acted like they had access to everything.
Right. I mean, honestly, even if you're just using the appendices for the Lord of the Rings, that's still a lot of material.
It is.
And I think that that's mostly what they're drawing from. So if they're using the Silmarillion to kind of inform their world building, even if they're not technically telling Silmarillion stories, if they're just telling stories from the appendices, but they're using the kind of using the Silmarillion as sort of ambiance, I guess that's fine with me too.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie though. When they first said Lord of the Rings on Amazon Prime, I was like, we're getting Beren and Luthien.
Yeah.
That's what I thought we were getting.
And look, you could go back. You could get, depending on how this goes, how this spins off, how well this does. And I would actually rather see, it's like, This is my one gripe with this show so far. Like, I know there's a lot of things that are like, is it going to be done right? Is it not? Right now, I don't know. So my biggest gripe right now is just the time compression.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand why they won't tell this story this way. But if it's good, if fans love it, if it's well received, we know already that a lot of the rights to this stuff are fixing to just be out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it makes sense to me to do it the way Marvel does comic books, is to take that material, take those individual pieces, and do a 6 to 10 episode uh,
Run.
run, just a one off.
Mm-hmm.
A 10 episode Baron and Luthien series, that would be amazing.
Children of Huron. Ooh, that makes us all want to cry.
Well, so would Baron and Luthien.
That's true. Yeah, but they at least like Baron and Luthien like love each other and everything doesn't go wrong.
True.
The Children of Huron there, it all goes badly.
So yeah, it's I think that there's room for stuff like that later down the road, especially knowing we're not really delving much. Although they keep saying no, they keep saying second age, second age, second age. I'm assuming we're going to see quite a few first age things through flashbacks, though. I mean, just the fact that we're seeing the trees alone,
Mm-hmm.
is enough for us to assume that we're going to see some first age stuff.
I kind of wonder. I would love to see, especially since they use Galadriel narrating for the trailer. Like my like headcanon is the show starts with the same sort, like the story that Galadriel tells at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, where she gives the history of the rings, that monologue there with the illustrations. I would love to see something really similar, except for thus were the heavens and the earth created, basically.
Yeah.
Here's this, like, here's the really short version. Here's how the world was created. Here's the firstborn, the second, because like issues like firstborn, secondborn, elves and men, that delineation is going to be really important at this point. The awakening of we're a lot closer to the awakening of men than we were in the third age, even.
Yeah. No, and a lot of people like um a lot. So if you're not really steeped in the lore, you probably hear first age, second age, third age, and what you don't realize is there's kind of two, maybe two ages prior of Middle Earth prior to the first age.
Mm-hmm.
So the first age is not the beginning. That's just when men wake up.
Right.
That's when the sun is created, and
and that's all after the destruction of the trees.
right. So the history of Middle Earth is really, really long, like thousands and thousands of years. And so even doing this entire age, that's several thousand years, that's why they're compressing it. So I get it. But I would almost rather them pick and choose stories. But maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they're telling one big story that they can then, branch off from to tell these other individual stories. Or maybe they just want to compete with Game of Thrones.
But here's the thing, the difference though, they have although I guess Game of Thrones did in some ways, but like I heard them talk a lot about the 50 episodes they're doing. They have a story, one story that they're planning to tell over the course of 5 seasons. Right. And it's like, this is the story they're telling. So I'm assuming the story that we're getting is the fall of Numenor and the forging of the rings and the awakening of Sauron, all of that. I mean, that's a lot of story to tell. And I feel like kind of the 5 season plan that they have is pretty solid.
Yeah, no, I think that for what they're doing, I mean, Look, I get it. I'm a Tolkien purist. I love the original stories.
Hmm.
I don't want to see them messed up. I want to see them done right. And so that's why the shortening of, the time compression kind of hurts my feelings a little bit.
Yeah.
But truth be told, we're looking at people um trying to put on film, like, it was once thought that the Lord of the Rings was unadaptable. Like, if the Lord of the Rings, the core story, like
Hmm.
the Lord of the Rings, that is the core story of Middle Earth,
Right.
right? Like, that's the most complete thing that Tolkien finished himself.
Yeah.
Um, it was once thought unadaptable.
Right.
If that's unadaptable, then certainly the Silmarillion or the appendices, like, it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to see what they've done.
Hmm.
I agree with you, man. Thanks for popping in the chat, by the way. But yes, the time compression is number one on my list of concerns. Um, I'm not sure how they're going to handle that. That is potentially very problematic, depending on how they do it. I mean, we've got a couple of Durins alive at the same time, which doesn't really work. And I get it, and I understand why they're compressing it, but they're going to have to convince me that it was the right decision. But let's just jump in and talk about this trailer as a whole, because I think this is by far the best trailer that they've run. In fact, we've both been
Absolutely.
very critical of the marketing, really up until this trailer.
Yeah. The marketing has just been, like the round table where they had the same speech given by people in multiple different languages over, on multiple different,
Yeah, that was.
it's been really, it's been really bad. Like I said, the fact that all we wanted to talk about when we were starting off was like, and new characters and it's like, do you not realize, like, this is not selling people. It's not okay. So, Wheel of Time, for example, Wheel of Time is iconic. Lots of people love it. There are like some real issues with Wheel of Time. Just as far as kind of the world. Tolkien isn't that way.
Right.
Like, there's no reason that you have to fix it.
Well, no, because he did countless times.
Right.
He was constantly crafting and recrafting to get it right. Like, it wasn't someone rushing to put a book out, and that's what we talk about a lot. Is that Tolkien didn't write these books for the masses or for the fans. He wrote them for himself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Um, yes, I agree with that. The last teaser and then this full trailer at San Diego Comic-Con are a vast improvement in the marketing. And I really, specifically, the Felicia Day hosted panel at Comic-Con was excellent.
Yeah, it really was. And if you get on YouTube, you can see somebody, what do they call it? Somebody just streaming kind of their bootleg, basically, with the Stephen Colbert
Yeah,
which was excellent. He was, and as soon as Andrew's, Patton Oswalt was doing something or other, and Andrew's like, why the heck do they have, like, just do the obvious thing and get Stephen Colbert to host it? And then it was like, oh, he
yeah.
hosted the all Hall H panel.
And the Patton Oswalt interview is not very good, and I don't think it was the actor's fault. The interviewer is a lot of times responsible for the
Mm-hmm.
kind of the overall energy of a
Mm-hmm.
of a panel, and he just one. I don't think he had any business doing, or I don't think he knows the material,
Mm-hmm.
and he just didn't seem to be that into it.
Yeah.
He seemed to just be more about having casual conversation with the actors rather than getting to the meat. That's why I said the Felicia Day. When I saw Felicia Day's name on there, I was like, well, she makes perfect sense. Like,
Right.
I'm sure she's well steeped in Lord of the Rings, but like, I know she's really well steeped in fantasy storytelling.
And she's fun.
and she's fun, but she understands fantasy storytelling. And let's be
Right.
honest, if you understand modern fantasy storytelling at all,
Hmm.
then you sort of kind of get Tolkien because he created modern fantasy storytelling.
Yeah.
So somebody that's really knowledgeable in World of Warcraft,
Hmm.
they're going to kind of get Tolkien a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Obviously. Um, Also, I think this is a really good point. So, and I think you're exactly right. I think the main thing that they're going to be focusing on is going to be Numenor and the rings.
Yeah.
They're going to be focusing on. So, I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot going on there. We're going to have to meet the kings of men, right? Who will become the Nazgul and all of that. But I mean, obviously, we're dealing with a lot of Numenorians and dwarves who live a lot longer than regular humans, which is why I'm going to assume that they're probably going to lean more into those characters because they can last a lot longer.
Yeah.
But we've already seen Isildur and Elendil. Like, Elendil is the last king of Numenor.
Right. No, we're
So,
going to get, I mean, we're obviously, I mean, it looks like we're getting the fall of Numenor in this first season.
so we may actually just be getting the end of the second age. Really, it may, we may allude back to some issues, but this is
Yeah,
really,
I don't think we're going to get to see unless we see unless we see it through flashbacks. Sorry about that, y'all. And I don't think unless we see it through flashbacks, I don't think we're going to get to see Numenor at the height of its opulence.
which is a shame because like Numenor is really cool.
I mean, I think we're going to get like an indication, and we may see it, but I think that based on characters we're already seeing,
Like I said, if we're seeing Isildur, we're going to get to see the last alliance of men and elves, though. I think that's probably how this series closes out. I think this series
yeah, no,
closes out.
that makes the most sense to close it out there.
I mean, that's going to be pretty darn cool.
Yeah. So let's just specifically talk about the trailer for a minute, though. I think it is a beautiful trailer. As I'm seeing more and more stuff, it does look. I think it looks great. I think it matches very well with the Peter Jackson films. I think it looks better than The Hobbit.
I keep seeing people say it just looks like a Game of Thrones knockoff. It's like,
It's
well,
like,
that's
but
because Game of Thrones was a Lord of the Rings knockoff.
Right.
I mean, it's like, well, duh.
Right. No, I mean, Game of Thrones, and really, when you get down to it with Martin, he doesn't really make any bones about the fact that he pulled heavily
Yeah.
from Tolkien.
I mean, the thing is, at least he has the integrity to admit it
Mhm.
because all fantasy writers do.
Yeah, no, they almost all modern fantasy storytellers are borrowing from Tolkien in some way, shape, or form. He does at least admit it.
He basically
I mean,
went
even the
for
name
like,
of his
yeah,
like
Westeros.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. He just went for like Lord of the Rings, but everyone's terrible and
Yeah.
nothing ends well.
Yeah, no,
You know,
he mixed Lord of the Rings and the War of Roses.
Yeah. But so I agree. I think that the shots are beautiful. The costumes are gorgeous. So I'm really seeing a lot of things. And no, I thought that the actress playing Galadriel was Scandinavian, but she's Welsh.
She's Welsh.
She's
Yeah.
Welsh. So that
There's several Welsh actors.
that's interesting. But yeah, I guess we can kind of talk through it, if you kind of want to go through it shot by shot or at least scene by scene.
Yeah, so let's just start with that opening scene of Galadriel. You know, this is kind of going to play back into what she's telling Elrond later, that she has seen some things. Like,
Yeah.
now they've both, let's be real clear, Elrond and Galadriel have both seen some things at this point, but Elrond is a lot younger than Galadriel.
Oh yeah.
And she has seen she's seen the worst of the worst, especially as far as what elves will do to each other.
Right.
The kinslayings and
exactly. Well, because by the time we get to the third age, the elves are all pretty much on the same page. They're peacing out.
Yeah.
That's pretty much just where they're at. But like, we're going to see, I think the thing is, that mound of elvish helmets, probably that probably wasn't Sauron. That was probably other elves that did that. And there's a lot of conflict too. There's
Yeah.
a lot of
Well,
conflict.
this might be one of the battles. I think that this is the same battle scene we see orcs and elves fighting in later.
Okay.
With is it Finrod that we see in battle with orcs later?
Okay, yeah.
I think that because we have these same trees. Yeah,
Okay.
it's Galadriel's brother. Yes. So I think this is one of the big battles of the First Age.
Okay, with the
And that this is the aftermath. I think this is part of the lead in. I think that we're going to get a lead in narration, just like we did in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. I think this is her telling us about the events of the first, the years of the trees and the First Age.
Yeah, I think so. And I kind of wonder if maybe we won't even hear some of that same narration that she gives in the show.
What's up, man? Thank you for popping in the chat. We're actually streaming at a time where you can catch us, I guess.
Hey,
over there in the UK.
Novel. So yeah, I think that we're definitely going to get, and honestly, I hope we don't spend just all of our time kind of hearkening back to First Age events, even though I think it's really cool. That's not the story we're telling.
Yeah. And it's hey, Jugger Voice, thanks for popping in the chat. So yeah, I don't know how much First Age stuff we're gonna get.
Here's my thing with telling lots of First Age stories. I'd be happier if we just got just bits of them and then they actually go back and tell them properly later.
Yes.
That's because I really don't want all of our First Age stories just to be like little tidbits. I want to hear them for real later on.
Yeah. So we're gonna get some we're gonna get a lot of stuff here that we haven't seen before. There are a lot of cities that exist that don't exist in the Third Age, specifically elvish cities. And some of the big cities of men don't exist yet either. Rohan's not there.
Gondor's not there.
Gondor's not there. So Middle Earth looks pretty different at this point. We open up on a shot of what I think is Linden.
It seems like
almost certainly Linden here. So and we get the narration that, so Morgoth is defeated.
Right.
They think that the darkness has been wiped from Middle Earth, that they can now live in peace.
Go us.
But this is the recurring theme of Tolkien, right? Like, and this is kind of how Tolkien is it's a Christian, at its core, it's very Catholic. And it's Christian, and it's this idea that you can extinguish evil.
We throw the devil gets thrown down to just pop up somewhere else, making more trouble somewhere else.
So we do get this, we get this moment where the elves think that they have achieved peace, that everything's going to be good between elves and dwarves and men, and that is going to be the prelude to this new evil. Sauron, which is a totally different kind of evil from Melkor.
I mean, initially he kind of turns into basically Melkor 2.0.
He gets a lot more liking, but for Morgoth or Melkor, it's about destruction. It's about just destroying it because he can't control it, because Iluvatar basically says, like, all these things that you've tried to do, you can only do them because I allowed you to do them. And so he's so in anger tries to destroy it all.
Right.
So Sauron's more about imposing his will. Melkor is about destroying Middle Earth.
Yeah.
But we do see, so we're gonna open up on this time of new peace and this new evil kind of lurking in the background. This very Satan sort of thing. So we've got a lot of things going on. I don't want to do just a scene by scene breakdown here because I suck at doing that. We get a lot of real pretty images. The Palantir, that's really cool that we're doing that.
which means we're also getting, it looks like we're getting Galadriel in Numenor, which is interesting.
Yes, I really hope that we get a little bit. I want to see at least, or at least hear from someone a bit of the creation story. The creation story is, my favorite part of the Silmarillion. It's so well written. It's brilliant. I love that. I will read that. So I'll just pull the book down and read the creation story in the Silmarillion occasionally, just because I like it so much. So I'm not totally convinced that we won't get a little bit. I don't think they're going to show us. I don't know if they're going to show us any of the gods, or if they're going to show us the Luvatar, or if they're going to show us any of the Valar. We're going to have a lot more Maiar involved here, I think, than we've had.
I'd love to see me some Valar. The Valar are cool.
We might see. I'm curious if we're going to see Olmo.
Yeah, he's the one most likely to show up, but I guess we'll just have to find out.
See, Joker voice, the Galadriel as a warrior thing actually does work, though, and that's right from Tolkien's own words. That's straight from some of his words in the letters. Like, Galadriel kind of evolves beyond that sort of level of fighting. She becomes much more of a thinking sort of character, and a piece mover rather than a piece on the board. And but her as a warrior early on, it does work. Now, if they have her, they can't supplant other characters. I would be upset to see them putting her in the place of Finrod or Gil-galad or any of those characters. Like, if she takes their places, then that's bad. But showing her simply as a warrior, and I think we're going to see her as a warrior, and I think we're actually going to see the transition to her later self when Elrond tells her it's time to put down your sword.
Yeah. And I think this is...
Yes, absolutely. One of the letters, he describes Galadriel, and then very much says she had the spirit of the Amazon.
Yeah.
So Galadriel's a warrior. I can't get upset about that one. The professor himself said that was a thing. So I can't get upset.
I mean, we don't really, it's not the way that we ever see her.
Well, no,
in any of the stories we have, but that's the way that she was in his kind of head.
Yeah. It's just that she's so far beyond that by the time we see her.
Oh, yeah. She is the quintessential. But I mean, she's still scary, man. We see her, especially in The Hobbit. We see her show up. Not that I'm toting The Hobbit is like the greatest thing ever, but I think when we see her show up in that fortress, and she is, she shows up with Gandalf, and and you realize she is a force to be reckoned with. She's not, she has one piece for her realm. Like it's not just something that she's just like, and we're going to sit and have peace. Like,
well, let's not forget, like, the whole reason Galadriel comes back to Middle Earth is to rule her own kingdom.
Yeah.
She wants her own kingdom to rule. That's the whole reason she comes back to Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Like,
doesn't quite go the way
which
she
is
hoped.
kind of why, Frodo offering her the ring. He's offering her everything she ever wanted. So yeah, as far as this, Joker voice, as far as the inserting modern politics, the showrunners have vehemently denied inserting modern politics into it. I'm not saying that it's not there. I'm not saying it won't be. It's certainly not in the trailers. So what their definition of inserting modern politics is might be different than mine.
And though, I think a lot. So, for example, George Lucas has said that basically Palpatine, in his mind, Palpatine was George W. Bush. Sort of making this unilateral, you know, that was his kind of image.
Yeah.
Okay, but like, you don't have to read it that way. You don't have to necessarily even buy that for it to still be a compelling story.
Right.
You know, and so I think, yeah, there are a lot of things going on politically in the world that I'm sure people are going to feel like irrelevant to the story that they're telling. But as long as they don't superimpose a lot of buzzwords, then I'm not as worried about it.
Yeah. That's a great point, that this is before she even has her ring.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's powerful before and becomes sort of godlike after.
Mm-hmm.
So Joker voice, as far as the cast, I mean, I'm not saying the cast hadn't said anything. I haven't heard it. But I haven't watched all the interviews with the cast. I did watch most of it yesterday, and some of it was just like the Patton Oswalt interview was just kind of unwatchable. The Felicia Day interview was really good, like I said earlier. But I mean, certainly, yes, they've gone for a more diverse cast, and I understand. Like, Tolkien wrote this to be a stand-in history for Northern Europe, like he did, like 100%. The Romans largely extinguished the old traditions and history of Northern Europe when they came in. And that was always a big driving force for Tolkien, to give England, his home, its own myth.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, originally he would have probably envisioned his characters as white, because that's the characters that would have been there. But what I will say there is, the Tolkien books have been a worldwide phenomenon since he wrote them, since he put them out. People of all races and creeds and cultures have fallen in love with that story, and it became way, way bigger than Tolkien, who again wrote these stories for himself, not for other people, not for fans, not for any reason other than he wanted to create this. And having characters of color playing, actors of color playing these characters at this point, like, we're talking about people that have loved this stuff, for generations now.
Mm-hmm.
And of course want to be a part of it. Why wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
I don't begrudge that. I don't begrudge anybody that. Like, that is, I think that Tolkien would be thrilled to death that his creation of this history, of this myth for this small place in this big world, really became a myth for everybody. It became so much bigger. So diverse casting is yes, there are, like, I go back to the Eternals, and the Eternals, the casting really wasn't even the problem. It was just the fact that in the promotional material, the buzzword was diversity, diversity, diversity. Every other word. It was their whole red carpet thing was almost unwatchable because of the number of times they said that word.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for these people that they get to be a part of this. It's not like they're doing it to take it away from somebody else.
No, it's
and the thing I loved about listening to these actors across the board, that when they were asked questions, they constantly went back to Tolkien said, Tolkien said, Tolkien said, Tolkien wrote this, Tolkien wrote that.
mm-hmm.
That made me feel better than anything I've heard so far from anybody, that the actors themselves kept coming back to, well, the professor said.
Mm-hmm. Like, especially the elves, right? They had Elrond and shoot, I've lost it. Celebrimbor and Gal Galad, and like the conversation with that group of actors, like, pretty much the answer to everything was like, well, I went back and I was reading, and lots of that was the response to everything. It's like, well, I was thinking that Tolkien felt this way, and so I went back and I read this, all this relevant stuff, and that's really, I'm sure that it's a huge cast, and they're all going to have their own takes and views about what the story is really about. But as long as the script isn't heavy-handed, then I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. So I agree with that, actually, Joker. That was my problem with the Eternals marketing, was that it was solely based on that. The marketing, now an actor interviewing somewhere is not marketing material. If you can show me somewhere in the marketing campaign for this series where it has been about diversity for diversity's sake, I'll eat my hat. But like, I haven't seen it.
No, and the thing is, as long as they're still telling compelling stories, and they have and they're implementing diversity, then that's what we want to see. It becomes where the only point is like, we can do different things, we can, have lots more women, and when the story starts to suffer, then it's a problem. Which, whenever we had very little story points and the only things we were hearing were new characters, it was feeling a little bit that way. But I'm feeling a lot more reassured after this trailer and watching the actors and their real and the showrunners especially, and their very serious commitment to the Legendarium and the world and the spirit of of the writings.
Well, and that's the thing. I can't say this is going to be great or it's going to be terrible right now. I don't know. It's not out.
Right.
I can say that this last trailer looks fantastic. There are still things that concern me. First and foremost, the time compression. But like Numenor, the scenery looks amazing. I see some people saying it looks cheap. I don't agree with that at all. I think that these images sit just fine right next to Peter Jackson's stuff. In fact, I would argue that in some ways they're doing orcs better than Peter Jackson, with the orcs being covered up. Orcs aren't supposed to like the daylight.
Yeah.
Which is why he sent the storm, the clouds ahead of them.
Yeah.
As they marched.
I mean, you would hope in 20 years. And here's the thing: it's telling that the standard is a 20-year-old movie. Like, can you make it look as good as this thing that's 20 years old? So hopefully they'll be able to even, they'll be able to up the ante in some ways. Because there are definitely some places where the computer animation specifically, in Lord of the Rings, it's like there are definitely a few moments where it's like, yeah, I remember watching it as a teenager and going, that's not going to age well. And it didn't. Yeah. But overall,
Lord of the Rings ages better than most things.
No, there's just a couple of shots.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a couple of shots of Gollum.
It's like,
a couple
that looks like a video game.
Yeah, the cave troll.
Legolas on top of the cave, man. Legolas on it looked like it. And I just remember watching that and going, no. Right. And still, I watch it now and go, no. But in general, it's all really beautiful. And I am excited. Like, what are some things?
The cities look great. When they built so much of this was built practical, and that's the reason.
Add it to the list for your New Zealand pilgrimage here.
Right.
Once they get done with this show, we'll have to have a New Zealand pilgrimage.
Yeah, I mean, they built cities. Like, they were talking about walking down streets with alleys and all kinds of things in the sets. So they built a lot. There's a reason this first season cost as much as it did, and that'll all be absorbed into the other seasons. It's still going to be the most expensive series ever made, but hopefully it shows. But what they're showing so far, it does show. So what are let's talk. We got the mysterious figure, the one everybody says looks like Eminem in the trailer. And I mean, I get it. I grew up in that era when Eminem first hit big. So yeah, he looks a little Slim Shady, but let's be honest, like, that's anybody with short blonde hair, right?
And he's kind of skinny.
Yeah,
skinny
white
guy with
that character. I'm seeing a lot of things, mostly that people think that's Sauron,
and that definitely is kind of how they sort of steer you with the way the narration and the shots fall. Have you heard of Sauron? Boom, boom, and here's the picture, on the but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's who it is. He could just be the,
He could be a herald.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. There's lots of.
I don't think he's Sauron. Because I'm still convinced that the stranger is Sauron, a totally different actor. So I'm still convinced that. Granted, he can shapeshift. But the whole thing with the stranger, specifically in that teaser, the last teaser, with the ring of flame around him and it pulls towards him, so it's definitely magic. It very much echoes of Lucifer. There's this angelic being falling from heaven.
Ooh. Bridie Sisson, who plays the priestess of the Melkor cult. That's very interesting. I have not seen that.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that either, but like that's kind of been my suspicion. I know there's some others that have suspicion that Balrogs could appear as men. They are Maiar. They are of the same order as Sauron. They theoretically appear as other beings.
Right.
I think too many people tend to look at the Balrogs as some sort of just beast. It's not. It's a demon. They're of the same order of Sauron and Gandalf and all these other powerful characters. That's why
they're Maiar.
Yeah, you're right.
Or the plural is Maiar, right? Yes, Maya, singular. Okay, sorry, my Middle Earth grammar is a little lacking sometimes.
So that would be cool. That's awesome. That actually, I think that works better than anything else I've seen.
Yeah, because like some people were saying, this is the fair form of Sauron, whose name I am losing at the moment. Anatar. Yeah. And somebody pretty much hit the nail on the head. I think it may have been the guy from Nerd of the Rings who says, I mean, I don't know that I'd call that a fair form. It's not looking like a friendly person. Who's going to buy that?
Yeah, no, I think the stranger is Anatar.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's but I mean, the thing is,
although we are going to go into the third age. It could be Gandalf, but like, if you're going to do Gandalf, you got to do the Blue Wizards first, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, who knows? I don't know. I'm excited to go along for the ride on this story, but I think that it's all very intriguing so far. I'm really excited. I think the thing that excites me the most about what the showrunners have talked about, dwarves have kind of been used as comic relief. I mean, Gimli's awesome. Like, Gimli's awesome in battle, but Gimli's also a little bit comic relief.
Yeah, I mean, John Rhys Davies that's how he has rolled.
And they're definitely comic relief and through big chunks of The Hobbit, but that's the way they were in the book.
Yeah,
like they were that character in the book, and I think
they're actually a lot more serious. I think, like, ain't nobody gonna laugh at Thorin Oakenshield.
No. So I do think that I am very excited to hear them talk about wanting to do serious stories with the dwarves.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Because I think that's been one of the bigger criticisms from like your serious Tolkien fans about the Peter Jackson properties in general, has been that the dwarves are more silly than they are serious, and I think they're really looking to do that, to really do them justice. At this point, we're going to get to see Celebrimbor build the doors of Khazad-dûm, and we're going to get to see some really cool stuff. The other thing at some point, and we can keep talking about dwarves, but I don't want to forget to talk about the blade.
Well, let's go to it. You're talking about the blade that kind of reforms itself, that dark blade.
It's like a Morgul blade, but
yeah,
but different. Like, I mean, it's like a proto Morgul blade. What is the deal here?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about that blade. It does. A lot of people have assumed that it's a Morgul blade.
And it's definitely not friendly.
No, it's definitely, you know, the looks are very intentional, and I'm gonna assume that it's some sort that it's a Morgul blade until we learn different.
But you know, like the question is, why does this random kid pick it up and then it becomes, you know, and that's whenever it forms. You know, so, and I'm really excited we're going to get to see some Southerners, like we kind of see references to them, and they are seduced. Like we know that it's one of the groups of people that are seduced by Sauron.
Right.
And so I think that we may be able to see kind of some of the reason, you know, kind of the things that happen behind that, how this happens. Because I mean, that's the thing. Cultures don't just decide that they're going to be Nazis and kill off millions of people just out of the blue. Like there are circumstances that create that mindset.
Right.
And there are circumstances that create that willingness to be sold that bill of goods. And so I guess we're going to get to see some of that. So,
yeah. So other than that, like I said, I don't want to do a scene by scene breakdown of the trailer because there's a million of those already out there. I just kind of want to talk about things we like. So what else stood out to you in the trailer? Or if you're in the chat, like what were some of your favorite things from the trailer?
You know, I think some of my favorite things were just the cityscapes. We get to see some really beautiful locations. And that was always one of the more compelling things, I think, about Lord of the Rings was Lothlorien and Rivendell. And, you know, we're going to get to see these cities that Lothlorien and Rivendell are shadows of. You know, I mean, I guess we probably won't get to see Gondolin here, but I mean, how cool would that be to get to see that someday?
Yeah.
You know, these really iconic lost cities that are kind of the prototypes for the things that we're going to see later.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like there's a lot of stuff like that. I'm really curious, like the boat scene, the sea monster and Galadriel swimming away. I'm really curious to see what they've done there because that's one thing Tolkien, despite the fact this thing all centers around, you know, the island nation of Numenor and sailing across the sea, there's very little discussion of what lives in said sea in any of his writings. So that's
yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of here be monsters we get going there, because I think we're definitely going to get. I mean, and that's cool. We get to see creatures, right? Creatures are always it's not Star Wars. We don't go to it for the creatures, but it's definitely, I think, going to be interesting to get to explain. Well, because I mean, again, if it's telling the story, right, if it's mythology, lots of stories about the creatures at the end of the world.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be really interesting.
Right. And as far as you know, our friend up here said that Anson Boone would be playing Anatar. I had seen some stuff about Anson Boone potentially playing Sauron. I had not seen him listed as Anatar. They will theoretically look different, so I'm not sure. But that's interesting if true. But again, the Meteor Man is one of the odder things in the trailers.
Yeah. for sure.
And if it's not Sauron,
And it keeps
then
coming up. Like, clearly this is a big deal because they keep like,
yeah, I just don't see how that's not Anatar. But we'll see. I guess we'll see there. But I haven't seen anything concrete on Anson Boone, but that'll be interesting if true.
So I do want to talk just briefly, because there kind of has been a lot of talk, you know, like lots of inevitable comparisons with Game of Thrones. And we talked about this early, that we really hoped that they weren't going to decide to tell the dark, hopeless kinds of stories that Game of Thrones, that is Game of Thrones, and just try and shoehorn it into Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of talk about this is going to be our Game of Thrones. That was a lot of the kind of talking points really, really early on in the production.
Right.
Or development, even before they were even producing. But when we were listening yesterday to the showrunners talking, they talked a lot, and also the actress who's playing Galadriel, they talked a lot about Tolkien's, his commitment to good, and good winning, and joy. And somebody brought up that, you know, Tolkien understood the difference between joy and happiness, right? That you don't always have to be in a state of bliss to have a sense of deep and abiding joy. And I think that's a really, really important point. And I was really glad to hear that addressed, that they weren't looking to tell a hopeless story. They're looking to tell a story where good is good and evil is evil, and doing the right thing is the right thing, you know, and you don't have to do the evil thing so that maybe it'll come out right in the end. Which I feel like is kind of the hallmark of Game of Thrones, is that kind of worldview, and which is fine for what it is, but I don't want to see that in Middle Earth. And I'm, you know, just based on the things that I'm hearing the showrunners saying so far, it sounds like,
well, Game of Thrones is sort of Lord of the Rings without the Christian worldview, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, so I know there were a lot of concerns about what Jeff Bezos meant when he said, you know, bring me my own Game of Thrones. And
I can tell you what Jeff Bezos meant. He meant show me the money.
Yeah, for sure.
He said, bring me the multi-million-dollar revenue generating project. That's what he's looking for. He's looking for the money. He doesn't care what kind of story it is. Yeah. He cares how much money he makes on it.
Well, and I love right now that we're sort of experiencing a golden age, provided that these things are good. But even, we're seeing, like, fantasy has always lagged behind science fiction as far as being accepted for entertainment for adults. Like, science fiction used to be for kids, and then it slowly kind of became a thing for adults. And
well, the kids grew up.
But the kids have grown up for generations without taking it into their adulthood. But
the generation who read Lord of the Rings as kids grew up.
Right.
And they're the ones who pulled. I mean, I think it's really hard to overstate the influence of Tolkien on fantasy, if for nothing else. I mean, that's whenever people started taking fantasy stories seriously, is whenever the kids who read Lord of the Rings when they were teenagers started to grow up.
I mean, is there a bigger name in fantasy storytelling outside of maybe the Brothers Grimm?
No. He's the name.
Yeah.
And I think will be forever.
Yeah, it's you definitely can't talk fantasy without talking about Tolkien. And I'm glad that this, they seem to be steering away from the things that were my biggest concerns about them doing this. Could they make this show and completely make something that is completely non-Tolkien? Yes. very easily. And all that takes is it going to be a perfect story matching Tolkien's Legendarium? No, it's not, because of the time compression. They're just not going to be able to do it. But can they tell a story that's more than just generic fantasy and that commits to the things that were important to Tolkien?
I want the themes.
Friendship, love, and different kinds of love. Good versus evil, and the fact that you can distinguish between the two.
And
the
you do the
fact
right
that evil
thing.
is there, like, if you don't read the whole Legendarium and you don't read all the stuff, you don't really realize that, like, this is this thing where evil pops up, it's wiped out, it comes back, it comes back, it comes back, until eventually Iluvatar will enter the world himself and extinguish it for good. Like, that's the story. Like, right. and so,
and that is the story. That's not just this story. That's the story.
Right. That's why we love this story.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see where they go. I'm more excited for this show at this point than at any point since they announced it.
Yeah, me too, for sure.
I'm feeling
100%.
a lot better about a lot of things concerning this show. You got anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm curious to see, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of pitfalls in making a show like this, and
let's not forget that The Lord of the Rings was not a perfect translation of Tolkien's work.
It's true.
This is also driving this new thing where people are like, this doesn't even begin to compare to The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, in the Hobbit movies, referring specifically to the movies, not the books. Like, I remember a lot of y'all really hating those Hobbit movies, like,
right. Not to mention the people who never forgave the movies for elves showing up at Helm's Deep.
Right. They're not, nothing that's been made is a perfect translation of Tolkien's work.
It's true.
And so
but as long as we capture the spirit,
that's the thing. It has to capture the spirit Tolkien intended. That's what makes it special.
Yep.
You deviate from that and you're going to lose people. But as long as you tell something that's true to what he believed, it's going to be fine.
And I mean, they've got the best. They've got John Howe. They're using, Alan Lee's artwork. They've got lots of the same. They've got Weta involved. They've got lots of the same people who are responsible for the look of Middle Earth being so iconic. And I really love the fact that we're seeing some cultures that have a really different look. Like, some people were kind of like, why are they dressed like that? But like, we've got the Numenorians, or maybe even some other human cultures we're seeing, have a very Byzantine look to them. Yeah. Which is awesome. Like Romanesque Byzantine, that's something we haven't seen explored. And a lot, we all feel like kind of medieval is the only way that Tolkien can exist in the world. But there are actually lots of images of Tolkien who's really different. Lots of illustrations and things that were endorsed by Tolkien that were really different from the look they wound up going with. So I think we're going to get to see some of those different looks, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
all right. Well, I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up for the day. So I think it sounds like we're both maybe more hopeful for what's coming than we have been so far. And specifically, if you want to watch some of the stuff, find the Hall H panel that Stephen Colbert hosted. It's fantastic. And find the panel that was done by Felicia Day. That's what I would say. Go watch. I don't know how you could watch those and not walk away feeling a little better about what's coming.
For sure.
Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. Marisha, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at princesses_padawans and occasionally on Twitter at ppadawans. Where can we find you?
All right. You can find me running the Twitter account for this show at sci_fictionary. You can drop us a line at thesciencefictionary@gmail.com. And you can find our podcast, our actual audio only podcast, the Science Fictionary Podcast, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And until next time, may the force be with you.